Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Diving into Wetlands virtual field day. I want to thank our partners for this field day, not only Prairie Rivers of Iowa, but also Heartland Co-op, the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, the USDA's NRCS, or Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Story County Soil and Water Conservation District for all of their help with planning this virtual field day. So I just wanted to introduce our speakers for today. We'll start with myself. My name is David Stein. I am the Watersheds and Wildlife Program Coordinator here at Prairie Rivers of Iowa. Also joining us today is Ruth McCabe, who is the Conservation Agronomist at Heartland Co-op. Clark Porter, who is the Environmental Specialist at the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. And Shane Wolf, who is the Edge of Field Coordinator again, at the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. So before we get started with our main event, going through the videos and introducing all of our farming partners, I will go ahead and just introduce the concept of Iowa's wetlands and talk about some terminology that we use and introduce the different wetland types that we have here in the state. So first we have prairie potholes. These are small wetlands that were formed during the last ice age as glaciers were receding from Iowa. They cut little divots in the landscape, little potholes, and left small wetlands where the glaciers used to be. We also have marshes. These are pieces of wetland that are dominated mainly by grasses, sedges, and wildflowers. We also have swamps, which are, instead of dominated by grasses and sedges, these are wetlands dominated by wet-tolerant trees. We also have fens, which are a very strange wetland type that produces peat. This is formed through mainly areas fed by cool, water rich in minerals and poor in oxygen, giving rise to a strange ecosystem. We also have oxbows, which are areas of river that were cut off as the river was changing its course, leaving behind a U or a bow-shaped body of water. And then constructed wetlands, which are made by people, mainly for water quality and soil health benefits. But one of the takeaways that I'd like to put across with Iowa's wetlands, these once covered 4 to 6 million acres of Iowa's landscape in the past, but over the past 150 years, wetlands have been reduced by around 95%. So restoring them wherever we can is extremely important. Speaking of which, we'll also have to talk about the benefits of wetlands. So now that we are looking to restore some of these wetland types, we want to get into some of their benefits. So the main ones that we like to talk about are the ability for these wetlands to improve water quality. So what these wetlands do is they act as sort of a natural filter or a kidney that removes and filters excess chemicals, excess sediment, excess runoff, excess pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, etc., and really cleans the water as it moves through the system here in Iowa. Additionally, these wetlands can store water. During storm events, these wetlands can store excess storm water and prevent flooding. And they can also recharge groundwater during droughts, which we, of course, are experiencing pretty intensely right now. Wetlands also provide wildlife habitat. These wetlands will provide a space for breeding and nesting and feeding for not only our native species, but for migrating species. And this is especially seen in our birds here in Iowa. Wetlands also provide recreational activities. People will use wetlands for fishing, for hunting, for bird watching, and even boating and canoeing if the wetland is large enough. And finally, wetlands will reduce costs and generate income. So areas that are frequently flooded or ponded, places where farmers are not seeing a good return on their investment from all the inputs that are going in them just to be ponded and flooded in a typical year, these areas can be retired. And when these areas are retired, they can be enrolled in a wetland program that often provides financial benefits or compensation to that landowner. So we're going to go ahead and get into our discussion of the first wetland type. This is the Oxbow Web. So again, these are wetlands that have been formed by being cut off from the main stream channel as a river is meandering. So we will go ahead and look at this wetland type here locally. We'll hear from Heartland Co-op conservation agronomist Ruth McCabe as she interviews Tom Cackler, who is the landowner who put on this oxbow in his land. And following this, we'll go into a discussion by Clark Porter, who will talk about the ins and outs of putting in an oxbow and what we're taking a look into here. So I will go ahead and share my screen with the first video. So just bear with me really quickly and I will get this screen shared.
Can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience and then tell everyone why you decided to restore this oxbow wetland on your property?
My name is Tom Cackler. I live in Story County, north of Ames, and we bought our property. It's 17 years ago now, and I wrote it in CRP shortly thereafter. And then this is a re-enrollment, and in order to re-enroll, we needed to enhance the features of the wetland, and so worked with the USDA Service Center, and they helped design, and we installed an oxbow this spring.
Great. So for this oxbow restoration, can you tell me, what process did you go through? How long did it take to get the installation started?
I re-enrolled last October, and through the fall and early this spring, the service center helped with the design, and they came out and did the layout and the survey. So it actually, I suppose, it maybe around 6 months in that process there to get the design finalized, and then the process for installation was very quick this spring. We've had such a dry spring. We were able to get it graded and seeded here within about a 2-week period.
Yeah. So this process was actually pretty speedy. When you first enrolled it in CRP the first time around, how long did that process take? Do you remember?
The process was not too long. I needed to own the property a year before I could roll it. The first year we had it in crops, and then we enrolled it. I believe just the waiting period there, the process was very quick. The difficulty I had that time was finding the right condition to put the seed in, and so I actually had to put the seed in the winter after things froze up because it was wet that fall and early winter. So we put it in on the snow.
Okay. Was it hard to find the native seed for planting? Was there a lot of paperwork? Was there anything like that that you ran into?
We're very fortunate here in Story County. We have really good resources, and so I worked with the Pheasants Forever program and was able to acquire the seed mixes that I needed very easily.
Great. So having this wetland, having this oxbow wetland, or having the CRP, because I guess your wetland hasn't filled in yet with water, but just in general, having the CRP, what kinds of benefits have you seen? What things have you really enjoyed because you've had it there?
Well, certainly it's been very beneficial to the wildlife in the area. I mean, we have lots of variety of not only pheasants but different small animals and deer and turkeys and so forth that really have enjoyed the CRP establishment there. And it's also, I've noticed, really been helpful with erosion. I know when we first moved here, the ditches were full of silt, and the county has cleaned them out, and it's been very, very stable since we put the CRP in. The other thing is just very pleasant to have that on your property, and I feel good because I think it's very compatible land use with the river bottom here. So it makes a very nice addition to our property.
Yeah, you run up next to a creek, right? Which creek is it?
It's Iowa Creek.
All right, awesome. So, what advice do you have for other landowners or farmers who maybe want to install or restore, their own wetland? If you could give them a piece of advice, what would you say?
Well, really, I'd say to explore it. It's really been very, very easy for me to accomplish this working through the FSA and the USDA office here in Story County. And, cost-wise, been able to cost share all the practices, and so it's not been real burdensome as far as expenses. And so, but there are a lot of good resources available, and I'd say just to make yourself available to them.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so that was our Oxbow video. We will now move on to our first round of questions and discussion. We will have Clark take over that role. So let me know if you want to screen share. Otherwise, we will start the discussion.
Yeah, David, if I could screen share, I have a little a series of slides I was going to share.
Yep, you should be able to screen share, so go right ahead.
All right. Can everybody see that okay?
I don't see anything except for
No.
you.
Oh, hang in.
Let's see.
Let me see what I'm potentially doing wrong here. Okay, do we have multiple participants sharing simultaneously?
Yes.
Okay, let me try it again. Does everybody see that?
No.
All right. I'm decidedly not a millennial, so if anybody want to coach me through this, go right ahead.
Clark, when you click share screen, does it offer you a selection of screens to pick from? A window should pop up and show multiple.
Ah, yes, now it does.
Yeah, so pick the window of the presentation,
Mhm.
and then we should be able to see it. There we go.
Hey, perfect.
Ah, thank you very much. Appreciate that
Yeah.
advice.
The struggle is real, Clark.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and just do a full screen here and minimize that. Okay. So sorry for that. Anyway, what I wanted to do is just back up a little bit and cover some of the basics behind Oxbows, because I'm assuming that some of the people that are listening in today might be wondering if their land is appropriate for the placement of an Oxbow, and to learn just a little bit more about maybe their physical features and what to look for. And by all means, if you have any questions, go to your local NRCS office or talk to IDOLS or NRCS folks about this, because they will have seen many more and can help you in identification. So first, I just wanted to show that I thought it was kind of interesting. This is actually not too far from here in Blackhawk County. If you were to look at the two slides here, you can see on the left, this is from the 1930s, and the two areas that I have circled are bends in the stream. They're what we call meanders, and they're quite severe meanders. And by 2019, and really before that, the stream is flowing to the south. So the stream had made a shortcut during periods of high water flow, and eventually carved a new channel. essentially cutting off the old meander, and that is what becomes an oxbow. And I think on the screen on the right, the bottom circled one is a particularly dramatic example of an oxbow. And so that's really what happens. It's a matter of the meander, getting closer and closer in the stream, finally just taking a shortcut and pinching off or leaving off a section. And those then become, there's still the old channel there, and that becomes your wetland. Also, I've met with some landowners there's sometimes some confusion about what an oxbow is and what it is not. A common confusion is, say, what we would call a scour or a scar in the land, where the water indeed has left the banks and cut some kind of a channel, but this usually occurs only during high water, and it's more just kind of a flood scour, and it doesn't always connect meanders. Sometimes these just flow out into a broad floodplain, or they might cut back into the creek, but they don't really create oxbows. A little bit more about the causal factors behind the oxbows. First of all, as they form, then they also provide adequate or an improvement in water storage. So there's a benefit in terms of flood reduction. Meanders and streams are also nature's best way of filtering out sediment, because the water is a little slower in every corner, and so sediment deposits. It also slows the water down, so we don't get flash floods as much, these high water events. And as many of you know, we've straightened a lot of streams in the state of Iowa, and we've plumbed the landscape with drainage tile, and straightened creeks and drained wetlands, and as a consequence, we're facing floods and flash flood events. We're also experiencing higher rainfall events, more extreme weather, and we aren't as resilient because of all that we've done. If you're in an area where the oxbow can not only store stream water and ground runoff, runoff from the surface, and you can actually connect a tile line to the oxbow, then you have the added benefit of greater nitrate filtration and phosphorus reduction in that water and in the oxbow, up to about 45% reduction in nitrates. So it enhances. I see here it says 56. So I guess it depends on your source, but it enhances the nitrate and phosphorus reduction greatly. And this is often what we're looking for. If tile lines are nearby, the funding option with IDALS is present. IDALS, the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, will offer up to 50% of the funding for construction of the oxbows that can take in tile drainage, because it is such an effective way of denitrifying that tile water before it enters the stream. If not, you still have funding sources, and there's still great benefits to oxbows, from habitat to nitrate and phosphorus reduction. And NRCS, the EQIP funding stream is an excellent one for that. There are also some private dollars or private nonprofit dollars, for instance, through Nature Conservancy, National Wildlife Foundation, and other sources. So I encourage any landowner to go into the NRCS office and talk with the experts there about all the potential funding availabilities that are present. I wanted to share this slide as well. This is a current Oxbow project that I'm working on with NRCS. We're not sure at this point whether we're going to be able to get tile drainage into this Oxbow or not, but it shows you something I want to point out. This stream was actually straightened out. You can see the straightened portion, the orange arrow pointing to that. The old channel is where the dotted yellow line is. It kind of went that direction and bent and then kind of went back in. And there were oxbows off of the old channel. And when this stream was straightened, that portion leading northwest there, that old channel was completely abandoned, cut off, and as well as the oxbows that were coming from it. And so what we're going to be doing is reconnecting at the base that old channel and allowing this area to backflow. And we're going to be excavating those old oxbows as well. We're going to be allowing that area to backflow and create an oxbow wetland that consists both of the old channel and of the oxbows, which of course are even older channel. This required a fair amount of surveying. We're midway through a design process right now. One option might be to connect tile, the solid orange line at the top there. There is a tile line that runs there, and we might be able to connect some non-perforated tile from that neighbor's tile line to the top of this oxbow area and filter tile water through it as well. There are other oxbow opportunities downstream there, as you can see in this picture, and perhaps we can work on some projects with those in the years to come. Some of the design basics about oxbows that are kind of important to know are, first of all, oxbows, if you look at the picture on the right, there's an arrow pointing down, and the line leading from that design is where an excavation will be to connect the base of the oxbow with the stream. In this case, the stream is actually flowing to the north. And what you want to do is you want to connect on the downstream side. You want to connect the oxbow on the downstream side, not on the upstream. If you connect it on the upstream, then the stream is going to enter that oxbow and just scour through there. And during high water events, it would be quite destructive. So if you connect on the downstream side, it can backfill. This one is also going to have tile connected to it. Finally, the edges of these are beveled off. If you look over at the left-hand side, you can see where they're going to angle the edges in a little bit more so that they're not just drop-offs. And they're going to be excavating. When they say original ground, that's original ground prior to excavation. So they're going to be excavating down from that original ground to the surveyed bottom. It's kind of interesting when you're surveying these because you go looking for the depth of sediment to the actual old creek channel. And you can use a tile probe, and when you're pushing down through the sediment, all of a sudden you'll hear sand scraping it. You can feel it, and you can pull that tile probe out and measure the depth of the sediment. And that's what we need to excavate down to, is that old channel, the old sandy, rocky channel. I would, I should also add another important feature of design is that you really need 50% or less tree cover around an oxbow. So this one that is in the picture to the right, they're probably going to have to be doing some tree removal there. That's because of the leaves. If you get too many leaves dropping in the oxbow, they settle into the sediment and they create an anoxic environment, kind of a sulfury smelling, swampy area that is really not the best in terms of restoration. And so tree removal might be necessary in some of these areas. I wanted to point out that I use a Iowa Geographic Map Server a lot when I'm looking around for areas for potential oxbows. Anybody in the public, any landowner can access this. I have the link up there. Maybe these slides will be shared later, but you can also just Google Iowa Geographic Map Server and look at your own land or your area and see if you can see any oxbows from overhead. Okay, I close down there. I'll stop my share. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kler.
You bet.
So we will move right along to our next video. Let me get that up. So our next video is going to be all about prairie potholes. Let me see. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So our next video is going to be all about prairie potholes. I will have again Ruth introduce the topic and our landowner, and then we will get the video started.
Yeah, thanks, David. Okay, so prairie potholes are actually some of my favorite. They are a little more ephemeral. Sometimes they're like seasonal wetlands. Historically, they were all over the landscape, especially in like north central Iowa. And you frequently see them, obviously, in prairies. There's suppressions in the landscape where water would pool. They are a little more ephemeral, and they're a great place to get some pheasants. And we have a landowner actually recommended to me by the NRCS in Story County, whose name is Ron. You will hear him in the video today, who has a prairie pothole that was established. And so you can see some pictures of it. We've got some footage and some pictures of it in the video. It wasn't wet when we were out there, but you can use your imaginations to think about how it would normally be filled in with water in a wet year.
Great, thank you, Ruth. We will go ahead and get the video started. Let me share my screen really quick.
Can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us why you decided to restore this prairie pothole wetland on your property?
My name is Ron Morgan, and I'm a retired veterinarian from the Ames Laboratories. And the prairie pothole wetland is just north of Ames, between Ames and Gilbert. And the reason we decided to do it is a number of reasons, but basically it was already in CRP when we bought it. It had just been taken out, and we thought that was a good use to put it back to a government program. So.
Okay. Can you describe some of the process that you went through? Like, did you use the cost share programs, and then how long did it take?
I went into the USDA office in Nevada, and after I read that they were opening up the CRP program again, and asked them if it's possible to put this one back in, and they said yes, it is, and this is the program they suggested for this land. And so basically they did all the paperwork from then, and I communicated with them a couple times, but basically I just signed it, so there was really nothing to it to speak of. As far as what I had to do, it had been in CRP since 2004, except for when I bought it, the person who was deceased, the estate had taken it out of CRP because they thought it would sell better. So it was already seeded with it looked like a prairie grass mixture. And so I had no costs to put it back in because the seed's already here.
Okay, yeah, that's convenient if the seed is already in the ground. What would you say maybe was the biggest challenge that came with restoring the property again?
I don't know that I had any major challenges. If I wouldn't have farmed it the year before, I would have had to cut all the cedar trees, but I did that for putting it back into soybeans before I put it in CRP. So I would have had to have done that, but I did that beforehand. Other than that, there was really no challenge getting it seeded the way it was. I am having some problems with weeds coming up, Canadian thistles, and I'm working on willow trees and Queen Anne's lace right now. But that's really no difficulties to speak of.
Yeah, a lot of mowing.
Mowing, yes.
Okay, so when you come out here, what benefits have you seen when it's dry like it is right now, or when it's wet? What are some of the benefits that you can take away from this property?
The biggest benefit I see is I come out here with my son quite frequently. He still lives with us, and he usually brings a camera with him because there's always something going on out here, birds or deer or whatever. And particularly when it's wet, he's been trying to get pictures of. We had a nesting Canadian goose for a while, and it was fun to follow that. We've had various ducks out here. We've had some swans, trumpeter swans, I guess, and some other wildlife. I've enjoyed seeing the deer and the pheasants, and I came out here one time in, I think it was December, maybe January, and I scared up 27 pheasants and 7 deer. And this is just a 20-acre piece, and I was just amazed at how much activity there is.
Yeah, that's awesome. How about advice? Do you have advice for maybe another landowner or a farmer if they want to put in some kind of a wetland or prairie pothole?
Well, I think you have to evaluate each piece for what you want and what's going on around it. This particular pothole drains into Ada Hayden Lake, so it helps purify the water going to recharge the Ames water supply. So I think that's important, and Ada Hayden Lake also. That was important. Also, the neighbors around, I've got a vineyard real close, and farm chemicals are a problem there. And I got an organic farmer across the road. So that all went into consideration. Plus, it was very difficult to farm. And it was very difficult to farm because it had water on it most of the year. And to get to the south side, it was very difficult because you had to cross a waterway someplace. And the rest of it, there's very little of it that was really farmable after that. The other consideration is that the tile had been plugged up from the previous CRP, and it was going to be very expensive. It appears to be very expensive to get that tile cleaned out so it would drain properly.
Okay, that is a rational reason.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will go ahead and move on to our post-video discussion. This will be by both Clark Porter and Shane Wolf. So we will go ahead and move right into that. If either of you have stuff to share, I will go ahead and stop my share and let you take over.
All right. Thanks, David. All right. All right. Hopefully you guys can see that all right. Thanks again for the opportunity to chat with you all today, and really just thought, yeah, kind of, similar to what Clark did in the last his last presentation following the video, just kind of a quick recap. I'm with Ruth. Prairie potholes are awesome, neat natural landscape features deriving from glacial events thousands of years ago. It's just kind of a really neat natural feature, and particularly that we see in north central Iowa. But you hear varying numbers, but I've always heard something like 95% or more of these potholes have been drained with subsurface drainage. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for restoration, and kind of want to talk about some of these opportunities because, yeah, for farming, these typically are troublesome spots on a regular year. It's kind of been interesting doing field work here over the last few weeks because, as I'm sure you're all aware, it's been a very dry year so far. And to be honest, the potholes actually look pretty good this year. But we all know that this has not been a normal amount of rainfall. So just to kind of give a better kind of geographic scale of where this prairie pothole region is, sometimes I feel like I always just kind of think of it from an Iowa perspective. But really, you can see here in this pinkish reddish color that pothole landscape really extends itself northwest all the way up into far reaches of Alberta, Canada, across Saskatchewan, Manitoba, into the Dakotas. And so there's a lot of this landscape, but you'll see particularly in Iowa, a majority of our pothole landscapes are within what's called the Des Moines lobe. So I thought it might be just helpful for those folks that may not be from within that area, just to kind of you can kind of get an idea of which counties are impacted. Not to say that there's not pothole landscapes off of the lobe, but this is just, again, where we see a majority of them. And here's a photo I thought I'd share that found from NRCS. Then a really nice thing about these potholes is if they haven't been artificially drained, really there's not a whole lot that needs to be done, right? When we get into the next video and next presentation afterwards, that, you know, these CREP sites are going to be more of a constructed wetland, where really what we're doing here is more of a restoration, which I think is an important piece. But, you know, in addition to these natural examples, you know, one of the big pieces of the nutrient reduction strategy for Iowa is to incorporate wetlands into these projects. And this is a slide I borrowed from Dr. Bill Crumpton at Iowa State University. Over the last 20 years or so, we've had a lot of experience with what you'll see there called breakpoint sites, which are going to be these CREP sites that we talk about on our next video. But there's only so many spots where these work. You know, we knew we needed to look at other landscape opportunities across the state, and you'll see higher in the drainage area of what this is called a watershed that drains from northwest to southeast. You'll see all these little black dots that are all over. These are going to be those upland depressions or those prairie potholes. And so Dr. Crumpton and his team said, how can we utilize these, you know, outside of what they're just kind of, you know, whether they're, you know, not converted over to cropland, or even if they are, you know, how can we utilize them for additional water quality benefits? And so what he, you know, kind of came up with is, let's look at these prairie potholes and try to enhance them, really is kind of the goal. And I like what David shared earlier, that, you know, we can kind of think of these as like a kidney. And I think it really kind of lends itself, that language lends itself well to this particular type of project, where, you know, we may have a existing drainage district, so a large tile infrastructure that may either go right underneath the prairie pothole or go off just to the side of the prairie pothole. And then what we do is we intercept that tile above, a little higher in the watershed, and basically run a distribution tile that will allow for that water to surface into the pothole. We maintain that existing drainage district main, but basically try to get all the base flow as much as possible over to the pothole, give it the opportunity to denitrify, and then be that, you know, water source for the other benefits like wildlife benefits there, and then basically bring that water, once it's been treated, back into the drainage district system. So we think that there's a lot of opportunity there. We've done a few projects so far, and hope to continue to do some more. I included one additional slide here that's just kind of a project that's actually the construction bidding is being opened on it today, which is pretty awesome. But you'll see here, this black line here is the existing drainage district infrastructure, and this green line is where we plan to, where my cursor is, it's where we plan to intercept that, and slowly at a slight grade bring that water over to the blue area, which is going to be our pool. And there is a berm that's shown on here because we have an existing gas line that comes through. But one of the nice things, so that's a little bit different, but one of the really nice things about these types of wetlands too, is that, again, it is natural topography. So some of the big constructed wetland CREP projects that we'll talk about, they're really awesome, really great projects, but they require an incredible amount, a really significant amount of dirt work or earthwork. Where these, we really don't have that much, right? It's just kind of relaying some tile and maybe doing a little bit of grading and shaping. But yeah, just you know, really neat type of project. You know, we kind of discussed some of the benefits earlier, but I just again would like to kind of reemphasize the wildlife benefits here. Yeah, especially like Ducks Unlimited is particularly excited about this style of wetland because ducks have traditionally or historically used these potholes prior to them being drained as a migratory resource. You know, as they head north and south. And so restoring as many of these as possible is going to be huge for that. And you know, of course, the water quality benefits is you know, going to be a big part of it as well. And so I'll talk through, because the programs are kind of similar. So I've actually, David, think it would be good to jump over to the CREP wetlands video, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about those style of wetlands and some of the programs available, if that sounds all right.
Great, thank you, Shane. I will go ahead and share my screen again, and we will get that rolling. Okay, so I will have Ruth introduce the last concept of the day and the last landowner featured, and then we will get started.
Great, thanks, David. Yeah, so this last one was admittedly had some of the prettiest footage. This is a nice constructed CREP wetland. CREP stands for Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. You will all learn a lot more about that from Shane, and maybe Clark might be speaking about it as well. And so the landowner here, his name is Alan Armbrecht, and he is also on the call with us today, or on the webinar with us today. He is actually a Heartland customer, so it was a lot of fun because he let me tromp around his property a few times to get some really good footage, and we had a few different interviews. So definitely this style of this video is just a little bit different, but I think you'll all really enjoy the footage. It was gorgeous when we got out there to get this.
Perfect. I will then open up the video and enjoy the last wetland that we have.
Hi, I'm Ruth McCabe, and I'm with Heartland Cooperative. And today we're going to be speaking with one of our growers about something special that he has on the landscape.
My name's Alan Armbrecht. This is our home farm. I've lived here for 72 years, so I had the fortunate experience of buying this from my grandmother. So this is the farm that our family has had for 100 years.
And just behind a building over there, Alan has a beautiful aspect on his property. What is it, Alan?
It's a CREP site, and it's a conservation reserve enhancement project that I put in about 15 years ago.
Alan, tell us why you decided to install a wetland on your property.
Back in 2007, 2008, I had about 35 acres that was really not usable. It couldn't even be made into permanent pasture. It was a low ground, and in fact, it had less than 1 inch of fall across the whole mile, and so you couldn't drain it. And so I went to NRCS and told them, you know, I had this ground, was there any programs that I could get into? And so they went and talked to the state. They came and looked at it, and they said this would be a perfect site for a CREP area. And it was one of the first ones in the area for them to build. They wanted to get the nitrates reduced from about 11 to 1,500 acres in Story County, and so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do the program.
So, Alan, how long did the project take from start to finish?
Probably about 2 years it took. Again, by the time they did the survey work, they had to get all of the other landowners that were involved to be okay with it. You're working with the federal government, the state government, the county, And so all of those entities had to be involved. And then, of course, by the time they picked the contractor, got the project done, it was all of 2 years.
Okay, yeah. What would you say was the biggest challenge that came with installing the wetland?
The biggest challenge for the contractor was it was very wet the fall when he started to do the work, and it was kind of a muddy mess. And I think he probably lost money on the project, but he did a good job when it was all said and done. That was the biggest challenge for the contractor. As far as for me, I had to work with the neighbors and get them to be involved and want to do the project also. Wasn't necessarily a challenge, but it was part of the project to get it to work.
So then, looking at the bigger picture, what are some of the positives and the negatives that you've seen, with your wetland in terms of all kinds of things like wildlife or your quality of life or recreation or even the value of your land?
A lot of benefits. Water quality has been improved. Iowa State came the first 5 years and did studies on nitrate reduction, and there was about 75 to 80% nitrate reduction at the bottom of the dam where the water came out. So it did what it was supposed to do in settling out the nitrates. We've really seen a lot of improved wildlife, pheasants, ducks, Canada geese, snow geese. They all come spring and fall. Just a lot of birds. Recreation has been great. Pheasants have been really multiplying. We've had duck hunters, pheasant hunters come, and they love to walk across the ground and hunt. So unfortunately, it doesn't do any good to stock it with fish because the water levels usually go down in a dry year, and so you lose most of that. But erosion control has been a little bit of a problem. Landowners above the project are still pretty much using normal tillage practices, and I'm afraid it's starting to sediment in and fill in a little bit, and probably eventually it will have to be dredged out.
So, what advice do you have for other landowners that want to create their own wetlands?
They have to be, of course, willing to work with all the agencies. They have to be willing to work with their neighbors, and most of all, probably they need to work with their tenants and get a mindset that this will be a conservation project. It'll be good for the quality of the land, the water quality, and they will get paid for it. It'll be a good rental property for years to come.
Would you do it again?
Definitely, I would do it again.
Okay, with that, I will turn it back over to Shane for the last bit of discussion, and then we can move on to questions.
All right. Thanks, David. Yeah, that was awesome. It's really cool of all these landowners to be willing to share, have us come out on their property. Thanks, Ruth, for all your work on these as well. And you guys seeing my screen okay, or are you seeing the presenter mode? Okay. Not sure what's going on here. It's not wanting to. There we go. So one of the things that I was kind of hoping to talk about, with these conservation reserve enhancement programs, really when we're talking about that, we're talking specifically about a program. What these types of wetlands are called, we call them breakpoint wetlands. And just to kind of go back to the map we were looking at earlier from Dr. Crumpton's lab, these are, again, typically further down the watershed than those prairie pothole style types of projects, where we can intercept a large area of concentrated flow. And usually what we use is some sort of sheet pile weir structure to impound that water. And I think this map here does a nice job kind of to help you kind of visualize what we're looking for on these style of wetlands. So the black line there, this is in West Fork Crooked Creek in southeast Iowa. But what we're looking for is an area of concentrated row crop acres that are tiled. The black line there is the drainage area, so the water that feeds into the wetland. The red line is actually the conservation easement boundary, which I can talk a little bit more about that later on. And then the blue line is the actual wetland pool. So you can see this is prior to construction of this project, but at that time it was just a grassed waterway. But then, yeah, you know, by putting that structure down where that darker red line is towards the southeast portion of the map, that's where our ability to impound water, and you can kind of think of it similarly to a pond. The big key difference, and the landowner described it in that video, is the depth on it. Because our shallow water is going to what's going to really promote denitrification, because it's all about the water contact with the soil. That's what contains our microbes, that really helps drive that denitrification process. I think this is kind of a neat picture too. Kind of gives you like a drone aerial view of what this looks like following construction. So this would be a CREP project in north central Iowa. So this one would be under that program. But you'll kind of see closest towards if you can see my cursor here, this is where that sheet pile structure is, with riprap to help control any erosion downstream. But towards the top of the photo is where that tile outlets. So, you know, a significant drainage area. This probably drains at least 1,000 acres. That comes down into here. And then this is our ability to impound that water. Typically what we like to see for the best nitrate reduction is to see at least 75% of the pool be 3 foot in water depth or less. And our pool size, typically what we try to look for is a 0.5% or 2% of a pool compared to the drainage area. So a good example of like a 1% wetland would be if you have 100 acres draining into a site, you'd want to look for a 1 acre pool. And I said that I'd share kind of earlier that red line. You can kind of see it drawn here again. So when we have large storm events, you know, there's going to be some bounce in that pool area. And when we put these projects in, we don't want to negatively impact that adjoining crop ground. So that 100-year storm event, we seed down to a native buffer seeding, and which provides its own benefits from a wildlife standpoint. Really can get pretty creative with the mixes there. But that's typically our minimum conservation easement boundary, just because we don't want to have any negative impacts to a cash crop. And so there's all kinds of different programs to do these types of constructed wetlands. The one that was highlighted in the video today, CREP, is a formal partnership between the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, which I work for, and then the Farm Service Agency with the USDA. However, there's funding for these types of projects through your local Natural Resources Conservation Service office. We have grants through the Environmental Protection Agency. There's what's called the Iowa Watershed Approach projects that are scattered across the state that are funded through U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So yeah, lots of opportunities depending on where you live. And I certainly would encourage you to visit your local field office. Every county has one. And to inquire if you think you have a project like with this type of opportunity. So again, to kind of just specify with what we work with in particular, or what I should say, what funding we have in particular. We have allocations from the state for our CREP program. We also have allocations through the Water Quality Initiative, and then also through Senate File 512, which is water quality infrastructure funding. And I thought this may be a helpful slide to kind of run through to just kind of compare the different couple of different state funding sources. So see CREP on the left, WQI on the right. And you'll see in the green are shared characteristics, and then the blue dots are, you know, kind of what makes them different. And so, you know, both with CREP and WQI wetlands, we're looking to intercept tile drainage water. We don't want to impact drainage from upstream, but CREP is only eligible in that Des Moines lobe that we talked about earlier. So there's 37 counties that are eligible for that program. The awesome thing about the WQI is that that's a statewide program. You know, it prioritizes the Huck 8s that are outlined in the nutrient reduction strategy. But it's something, if you're outside of that Des Moines lobe area, you know, you still may have an opportunity to do a project. Kind of talked about this already, but just you'll see there in the next few green dots are the wetland size, the depth. Another thing we need is soils that don't have too much sand or gravel, because we need the ability to hold water. And then also we need good materials for building that berm. You know, if you have something that's too much gravel, too much sand, that's not going to hold over the course of time. And then really the nice thing too is we're a little bit more flexible on the size of these projects for as far as the drainage area goes. If we're with WQI, CREP, we're kind of restricted between 500 and 4,000 acres of drainage area. For WQI, we can do sites over 200 acres plus. And really another key piece of this is trying to offset any costs to the landowners. So we have 100% cost share for the wetland establishment, the buffer establishment, and then with both the CREP and WQI programs, there's easement opportunities. And the two types we usually offer are either a permanent or a 30-year. And those payments for the easements are structured off of the Iowa State land survey values, and then also the Iowa State soil rental rates. And with the CREP program, there's also an associated CRP contract that's part of that program, which helps kind of spread that funding over 15 years, where the Water Quality Initiative easement is a one-time upfront payment. So I know I'm sharing a lot of information here. So, you know, if you have any additional questions or want to talk about this individually, please do not hesitate to contact us. Yeah, and I just thought from NRCS and FSA, I would just list out some of the other alphabet soup. So I apologize with all the acronyms, but I've tried to list out all the different, you know, things that may be available for these types of projects. Again, this, you know, it's folks like Clark, other conservation staff. That's our jobs, is to help navigate through these programs, right, and figure out what the best opportunities for you, your farm, working with your tenant. That's so, you know, just wanted to share what's available out there, but please don't let it intimidate you from, you know, inquiring if you think you have a site in mind. Here's just a couple of different programs or projects we have with the EPA. Again, just trying to leverage outside funding from the federal government to help support these types of projects. And really, there are an unbelievable amount of conservation partners that go into these. Typically, the soil and water conservation districts are the ones that actually hold the conservation easements. Similarly to like the maintenance agreements for cover crops and you know, saturated buffers and bioreactors. Those are typically held at the local SWCDs. We work with the drainage districts, local funding partners. We typically have these outsourced for engineering. We publicly bid these types of projects for construction. So we work with all kinds of different contractors. We have to permit these through DNR, Army Corps of Engineers. So there's just all kinds of parties involved. And the most important though is going to be our landowners, farmers that we get to work with. And you know, they're generally very patient through the process just because there are so many parties involved. And I have not heard anyone personally that has not thought that the end product of one of these big crop sites, I've only seen folks that have been pleased. Now I won't say that we haven't run into repairs that are sometimes needed down the road. You know, there's been tile installed for, you know, 150 years, right? And so trying to identify all the tile that's out there is going to be one of the challenges. And so we do the best job we can during the engineering process of that. But if you know, someone was going to ask, well, what's one of the common challenges? Missing tile is going to be the big ones, but it's not like we're just going to walk away from these projects following construction. You know, we want to work with the landowners to continue to make sure that these projects are functioning as they're designed. And so, you know, understanding that implementation process is one of the things that we do the best we can on, but we need to do better. You know, I think the landowner mentioned it took about 2 years to get this project in the ground. And we've worked with the Soil and Water Conservation Society to put together a kind of process model for landowners on how to understand what it takes to get the project in the ground from start to finish. And this is still in review. So we're working with our federal partners on this too. We expect to have a final version soon. And I was talking to David about this earlier. You know, following this field day, if down the road you'd like to get a copy of this, we would be more than happy to get that to you. But it really just kind of breaks up each of the major steps of the project, from putting together a conceptual design through engineering, permitting, negotiating easement boundaries, all the way through getting the project on the ground. The Nature Conservancy and Soybean Association, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have also been hard at work on an Oxbow restoration toolkit. I've been fortunate to be part of that team too. And so that is a toolkit that's nearing final completion, but will basically help conservation staff work with landowners to help understand all the different steps that are involved in that process too. So yeah, just, you know, wanted to, you know, make sure to try to communicate here that, you know, it's not like, you know, Ruth or Clark or myself is going to go out there and say, hey, you want a wetland? And then, you know, next week there's construction. It's not that fast of a process by any stretch. But that's just to make, you know, we do our due diligence to make sure all the, everything's, you know, done appropriately and we get a good end product for your farm. So that was kind of a quick rundown of the different programs and kind of the background on the CREP style wetlands and the pothole wetlands. So that's kind of what I had, David, but glad to answer questions, kind of have that open discussion.
Great, thank you, Shane. I have just one little outro slide left to go through that just has everyone's contact info on there. And once I put that up, we are ready to take questions. So we already had one question come in. I will go ahead and read that out. It's from my chat. So this is from Cheryl. She's asking just a general question from a non-farmer. Does the algae buildup shown on some of these projects indicate that nitrogen has been filtered out or that there is excess agricultural runoff?
Oh, I'll take the first stab at that question because I was the one getting all that footage. So when we were out on those days, Cheryl, it was really dry. Those oxbows were actually really, really low, really shallow. There was not a lot of water out there. It's been a pretty dry spring, as we were all aware. And so they were really warm and shallow. And if you think about what happens in like a warm pond, you know, that's really low. You can get a lot of light filtration, and so a lot of photosynthetic bacteria and algae, et cetera, can really flourish in those environments when normally if those were a little bit deeper or a little cooler, those organisms wouldn't flourish quite as much. And as dry as it was, you're actually not going to see a lot of agricultural runoff because there's not water moving through the tile. So those were as green and murky as they looked just because it was really warm and really shallow and really dry. So the organisms in those wet ponds could really take off. And in the crepe wetland, there was some duckweed and some pondweed, which is actually totally normal for a wetland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have another question from Bree. Do any of these programs seek out farmers that are already closely located to existing wetlands? And then the second part, what can a volunteer do to help these programs and their success?
Clark, did you want to try that one, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
Sure. Well, maybe we can both do it, Shane. Yes, I mean, we do. I'm working with a farmer right now who, while maybe not near a wetland, does have some very wet land, and actually, right nearby and neighboring property are some existing wetland that's already, registered as that, the designated wetland, so it's protected, and so it lends itself well to that. So yeah, we do look for those areas where there's an opportunity, like in the Prairie Potholes or other things where already it was a wetland once and could be restored. But I don't want to say that has to be the only area. Shane mentioned those breakpoint wetlands, and those are constructed. Those will occur often in areas that never would be a wetland naturally, but lend themselves well to becoming one, to holding water. So so both landscapes are appropriate.
Yeah, and I think for a volunteer for what you can do to help these programs. I mean, I think really just if communicating to your neighbor, maybe if you don't have a particularly great site on your ground, but you're a part of you're a volunteer for a watershed program or some local project or something like that. Communicating that these programs are out there is always helpful, and just encouraging folks to stop by their local field office or contacting David at Prairie Rivers of Iowa, Ruth. That's our responsibility, is to point folks in the right direction of these programs. So I think that's really one of the big things that a volunteer can do to help.
I can use volunteers too in my program occasionally with helping with surveying, and I mean, you don't need to be trained in that. I'll train you how to do that. We occasionally need help with. I use something called a tile maverick, where we're exploring tile to see what their gradient is and the location of the tile. Water monitoring, we can use volunteer help occasionally with that. So if you're interested in volunteering on any of these projects, whether it's wetlands or anything having to do with water quality, contact the NRCS office, and we'll talk to you. I also wanted to add just one comment with the complexity of the alphabet soup, as Shane called it, and the complexity of the funding and everything. I just wanted to share that landowners and farmers, you don't need to worry about that. we're actually paid to be confused by it. You don't have to be confused by it. So just seek me out. I tell people I'm paid to get confused, and I'll work my way through it for you and explain it to you once I understand. You don't need to worry about that so much. The only thing that we ask of you sometimes is your patience as we work through all those steps and bring in all the parties that we need to bring in to get it paid for.
And a follow-up question from Diane, does the NRCS office post volunteer opportunities on Facebook or on any website?
Some do, but I wouldn't be, I mean, and I'm not sure that all do. I mean, that would be kind of an option for each office and their website. And NRCS has an official volunteer program called Earth Team, and that is, you know, you'd have to sign some paperwork, but what that helps with is then you're covered through their liability insurance should you sprain an ankle or something like that when you're out monitoring water. So I would encourage you to come in and talk to us, talk to them, and you know, sign those papers and then kind of be available. So we on our website, I'd have to look. I don't think that we currently ask for volunteers on our website, but if you were just our Dry Run Creek does, which is a project that's under our umbrella in our office, and they're often seeking volunteers. I can use a few at any point in time, so just call in and ask.
Yeah, I think too that the local SWCDs within each, you know, probably also want volunteers for various cleanup events or, you know, or yes. And I think each county, not each county, but a lot of counties have a soil, water, and conservation district. Maybe they all have them. Maybe I'm being ignorant, but I think that they are always, you know, when they host stuff and they need volunteers for those kinds of events. So again, like you could call me, you could call Clark, we could track down, you know, the right person to put you in touch with if you wanted to volunteer at that level as well.
And Prairie River, oh, sorry about that. And Prairie Rivers has a water quality monitoring program as well. And we post pretty often on Facebook. So if we have upcoming events, we will post that and get you in contact with our watershed educator.
David, this is Alan. Just wanted to thank you for putting all this together. It looked like a really good educational opportunity for people. I hope you get this in front of landowners, because those are the people who need to you know, push for this. Also, I wanted to just put in a word for Ducks Unlimited and Pheasants Forever. They really help push some of these programs, and I think they're very beneficial.
Great, thank you, Alan. Thanks for reminding me of that. We will also be posting this as a recording on YouTube. So if you want to watch this again, or if you know a landowner that's interested in doing a watershed project or a wetland project or really anything, direct them over to our YouTube page and they can take a look at all these individual videos and the presentation as a whole. I will leave it open for any last questions that anyone has. Feel free to unmic yourself or unmute yourself or type it into the chat. We'll leave it open to any final questions. If there aren't any other final questions, thank you all for joining us today. It was a great program. I'm really glad everyone was able to attend. I hope you all enjoyed it. And I'll ask for any other final words from our presenters today, if they have anything to say.
I do. I just wanted to point out that wetlands are probably some of the best interventions we have for water quality. While they are expensive on the upfront, they last a long time. And so the per pound of nitrate reduction expense or the per year expense, whatever ratio you want to use, is incredibly efficient compared to many other methods that we have. And it also helps downstream communities that might need to spend their own resources on removing nitrates prior to, being able to use the water. They are part of the natural filtration system that we had in the state prior to the advent of farming. And we really need to do what we can to restore a lot of that while maintaining profitable farms. And there's a lot of effort and research and engineering that's gone into doing that. So really, please, if you don't have this on your land, but you know somebody who does have a possible site or who would be interested, if you know of any other landowners that you could contact and send our way, I'm begging you to do that because we need people to step forward. We need to get these projects lined up. It may take some time, but we've got to get it loaded on the front end if we're going to get results on the back end. And we've got to step up the pace of cleaning up the water here before it's too late for our source water, for our drinking water, for our local rivers, and for the Gulf of Mexico. It's a dire situation that we need to really step up with. So by all means, please call if you know anybody and can send us to make a phone call to anybody. We really appreciate that. So, thank you.
I want to follow that up too. Oh my, okay. I want to follow that up too, just by saying that Clark is 100% right. It does take some time to get these features in the landscape. They're not a quick thing, but I will tell you that the wait is worth it, and where there's a will, there's a way. Believe you me, every conservation professional wants to see more wetlands in the landscape, so we will do everything in our power to help you along that path. So if it takes 2 years, if it takes 3 years, trust me, we've got your back. We definitely want to see more of these in the landscape. So Clark is 100% right about that. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Great. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to all of our presenters, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Again, this will be up on our YouTube channel after we are finished. But again, thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thank you.